Guruve Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadare Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tada Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam devotees. So this would be probably for this week the only question and answer session that I may be able to get in. It's going to be a very busy week, and I'm not sure I'll be able to find the time to get it in. If I can, certainly I will. And if I have not been able to do a question and answer session, then I'll try to answer some questions back directly to people who write them. Dandavat Sadan Siddha Prabhu. So I'll try to do like that because I may not be able to come on other days during this week for a number of reasons. One is, well, of course, we're building up to the Divine Appearance Day. Appearance Day? This Appearance Day. Of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And so I will have to speak by the mercy of Sri Gurudev on the Bhakti Zoom on Thursday. So that's one thing. Second, it's just a very busy week for me. Got some different appointments and things like that. So it may be a little difficult, but I'll try my best. But today's topic has come about from a kind of group discussion that I had not very recently. Actually, this took place some time ago. And I was just reminded about the conversation and to follow up with one of these question and answer sessions regarding that conversation. And the conversation is distinguishing bhakti as a practice of salvation versus the practice of bhakti as a pursuit of becoming a lover of God. And is there truly a difference? If so, what is the difference? And also, obviously, we need to define what we're talking about when we speak about salvationist versus lover of God. So, naturally, for almost everyone, especially in the Western world, who has come in contact with our Srila Prabhupada's movement and have began, at least in this life, their journey in the path of bhakti, the initial impetus for taking up the practice was very much centered around the idea that was presented and confirmed by almost everyone that in general people in the material world were suffering. And due to that suffering, people were looking for alternatives. And they could search out those alternatives in the material arena and try to simply make various adjustments to their suffering and try to create different material arrangements to try to minimize, because you cannot get rid of suffering, but to minimize their suffering and to increase and maximize their happiness. So our Srila Prabhupada very expertly was able to present that actually in the material world, the constant struggle to try to create that getting rid of suffering and maximizing happiness was really a futile effort, because real happiness is on the spiritual plane, not on the material plane. Another thing was that there was a great presentation that the primary features of the material world were birth, old age, disease, and death. And in those four things, it kind of bypassed all the nuances of high school proms, marriage dates, winning the lottery, graduating college. So in other words, it was something that kind of got to the core of what the material world is and didn't deal with those fleeting moments where you could find some what appeared to be glimpses of happiness. And therefore, naturally, under that, sort of that shelter of birth, old age, disease, and death, well, this is certainly not palatable. Give me the alternative that will change those facts. So Bhakti was pretty much presented in many ways. I'm just describing a couple of ways, but it was presented overall as the means to get free from suffering and to find happiness on a permanent basis. Of course, both sides of that coin are fully vested with a self-interest. And the self-interest revolves around my situation. So, and usually it's not just mine, but it's I and mine. So it extends out to those who we consider we are related to in, various, sort of personal relations, from our immediate family to friends to community to nation, etc., etc. But all of it has the root of I and mine, right? Which is called aham, right? I and mine means really aham, right? So based on that consideration, we looked at Bhakti really as a tool of use for us to make the permanent. With great faith we invested in Bhakti. We're going to use this tool to make the adjustment that no material facility we tried was able to accomplish. That's to give us permanent happiness and remove permanently suffering. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years under this very deep investment of faith in the ideal of removing suffering and obtaining permanent happiness, a certain platform develops regarding how we perceive and practice Bhakti. And the core mood of that practice is called Salvationism. So it is not really terribly different from any other faith, Christianity, Islam, or any other variations of Vedic spirituality, or even other kinds of cosmology that essentially look at self-interest as the primary feature of the practice. That, in Christianity, I will obtain heaven and then I'll be free from any kind of suffering. I'll attain eternal life. In other iterations of Vedic cosmology, the idea of moksha or liberation, right? Because in spite of the 4 human pursuits, Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha becomes the 4th one. That having realized that even with the gaining of wealth, the ability, the practice of Dharma or using good karma to obtain wealth, to obtain enjoyment, nothing still works. Mogasha moga kamano moga gyan vichetasa. Bhagavad Gita says still it's all frustrated, so then the pursuit turns towards moksha or salvationism or liberation, right? So no matter what cosmology you examine, in the large population of those practitioners, self-interest is the dominant foundation, and salvationism is the principal outcome, right? Or principal desired outcome. So how does this very much differ from Bhakti as it was described and given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through our Goswami Vargas and down through our Guru Parampara? We need only examine the very definition of Bhakti itself. Anya abhilasita sunya jnana karmadya navritam anukulena Krishna anusilanam bhaktir uttam. So our Srila Prabhupada, that is the most quoted verse, I guess according to the database, in Srila Prabhupada's large volume of writings. The most quoted verse is this verse defining what is pure bhakti. So when you look at the verse, it becomes very clear from the very first line that there's a huge difference between the view of practicing bhakti with a salvation perspective and practicing bhakti with the perspective of pure love, which is the other part of the sort of subtitle of this presentation, which is, are we salvationists in our practice, or are we seeking to be lovers of God? So in the very first line of the verse, Anya abilas sunya. There's a suffix on the word abilas, ita. I will explain that. But anya abilas means, anya means other, abilas means desire, sunya means to be void of any other desire. So a very interesting thing is that it doesn't say to be void of all desires, because in some faiths or some religious pursuits, the idea of becoming void of any desire, anything, is the aspiration or the goal. And again, that's in pursuit of the idea, like in Buddhism, that normally the idea of suffering is caused by simply continual affiliation with activities within the material world. Therefore, to become void of any kind of desire, any kind of activity, will be the remedy, and we will obtain nirvana, or we will obtain a state of void or non-existence in which there's no possibility of suffering. So again, it's salvationist at its core, right? So, but Bhakti here says anya abilas sunya. So anya abilas means any other desire. So it gives rise to, there must be some desire that is permissible or that is desirable. So here, anya abilas ita. So let me explain this suffix ita. Ita means there will not be a contradiction to the statement anya abilas, right? If you are in a situation where natural human consciousness or natural consciousness would dictate praying to God or seeking God's protection. Like the example is given of Draupadi, that when she was being disrobed, she held up her hands and called out, "Hey, Govinda, you should save me." So one could think, well, if she had a desire to be saved in her personal chastity, or if someone is under some particular medical condition, some chronic illness, some accident, anything, and they call out, "Oh God, save me," that would indicate a selfish desire. So here the suffix ita says no, that it is natural due to the identification that's been had with that body for years and years and years. And of course, even in the case of Draupadi, who's an eternal associate of the Lord, to prove the point, that anytime one takes shelter of Bhagavan for protection, it is not axiomatically or automatically a sign of selfish desire. It is the rising of the nature of anyone to seek protection when they're in danger, right? So that is not counted as a material desire or other desire. So having removed that idea, then anya abilasita sunyam, being devoid of any other desire of self-interest, right? Anya abilasita sunya, jnana karmadi anavritam, and not doing anything activity-wise or through pursuit of knowledge that would cover bhakti. So we cannot stop acting in this world. Everyone has to do something just to maintain existence in this world. Even to practice bhakti, you have to maintain your existence to do so. So therefore, that means activity is involved, and that means karmic presentation is there. There's some karma, right? Of course, if one is practicing pure bhakti, then it is called akarmic activity. It means it's not producing any karma that will bear fruit in the future. It's completely transcendental. So the idea here is that we should not perform activities which will re-implicate us in material life and material karma, which then we have to deal with the reactions from that karma, right? And in the pursuit of knowledge, there are three categories: Tat Parata Gyan, Tvam Parata Gyan, and Brahma Jiva Aikya Gyan. So Tat Parata Gyan means knowledge about who is God. That knowledge is necessary to practice bhakti. So we cannot say all gyan should be removed. But that knowledge, which gives rise to understanding and how to serve and love God, that knowledge is indispensable actually. Tvam parata gyan. knowledge about our actual nature of being the Das of Krishna. How we are lovers of Krishna by constitution and by nature. That should also be understood. So that knowledge should not be rejected. But Brahma Jiva Aikya Jnana, that knowledge which equates the position of God and the Jiva being either one with that position or being the enjoyer like God or becoming one with God in the sense of Brahma Sayuja or moksha like in that category, that kind of knowledge is rejected in pure bhakti. Right? It's not rejected knowledge because in Vedic cosmology there are those who are pursuing Atma Gyan and Brahma Gyan. Means they want to know what is the soul different from the body, or they want to understand what is the Brahman. And their aspiration is for Brahma Sayuja, to merge or become one with that Brahman. So that is a valid form of knowledge. So here, Srila Rupa Goswami Pad is differentiating, this is not a knowledge that is desirable in bhakti. Because we have already acknowledged there is some knowledge which is desirable. This is undesirable knowledge because it will cover bhakti. Then, the Swarup Lakshan of this verse means the real intrinsic meaning of this verse is expressed next. Anukul Yena Krishna Anusilano. The word Anukul means favorable. And it means all of the endeavors that we do. The word Silanam comes from one Sanskrit verbal root seal. Means endeavors. So all endeavors, by body, mind, words, moods, everything, should only be Anukulyena Krishna Anusilano. To give happiness or Anukul to Krishna. All endeavors should only be for that purpose. Bhakti Uttamam. This is called Uttam, pure Bhakti. So, Srila Rupa Goswami himself, therefore, has distinguished what is the idea of pure Bhakti and what is its goal versus how we may have applied Bhakti having come into it from a certain position. Of course, Bhagavad Gita mentions Chaturvadaya Bhajantimam, right? Jana Sukriti no Arjuna. Right? There are four kinds of pious people who come to the path of Bhakti. Right? One person is those who are in distress. Right? Then you raise your hand if you've ever been in some material distress. Right? Or those who are seeking wealth. Those who are simply inquisitive. And of course, finally, those who, due to previous samskars, may have some true knowledge of bhakti, which arises again in a particular life. So, those who have come under the idea of distress, or those in pursuit of, artha here is translated as wealth, but it means basically in pursuit of their own happiness, self-interest. Those who are in distress, again, it's self-interest. So it's back to what I spoke in the very beginning. Right? And those who are coming out of being inquisitive mean those who are actually situated in the neutral position. Right? They have not yet come under the influence of either a salvationist mentality or the pure nature of wanting to be a lover of God. They're simply inquisitive. Right? And depending on their association in bhakti, they will take up a particular mood. Of course, in mature stage, everybody has basic mood of salvationism. But as we mature, that salvationist mentality or salvationist approach in bhakti should be subdued by the nature of Anukulyena Krishna Anusilanam, the desire to become a lover of God by seeking everything as only for the pleasure of God. Right? That's the objective of pure bhakti as described by Srila Rupa Goswami. Right? So now, those who are Gyanicha, means those who from a previous life have started the process of bhakti and therefore have come to the process with that level of Gyan from a previous life samskars, then automatically in their heart, according to where they had matured to previously, then they will either be moving away from the salvationist mindset, or they have to still work through that, depending on where they were in their last, karmic iteration, right? So, big point here and big takeaway here from that conversation was that the actual goal of pure bhakti is not salvationist in nature. So it does mean that in the course of our practice, we do have to refine our perspective on how we see bhakti. That bhakti is really not based around our interests. It's not based around getting out of the material world and free from suffering. It's not based around the idea of finding eternal happiness for myself, right? It is truly based around the sole desire for the happiness and pleasure of Krishna. Yeah? Therefore, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's quoted that the highest example of this are the gopis of Braj, and it's mentioned there, Atma Sukhe Dukhe Gopiyam Na Kareli Vichar. That the gopis, they never considered Atma Sukhe Dukh. They never considered their own happiness or distress. Only their full consideration was what will make Krishna happy. So the last verse of Gopi Geet is the full-blown manifestation of that. Yatesu Jata Charanam Gurunam Staneshu. Right? They express in this verse, it's called the Vasikrita verse, because after this verse, Krishna is forced by the nature of that kind of love to reappear. Tasam Avivacha Choris Mayamana Mukambojam Pitambara Dara Swagri Sakshat Manmat Manmat. So in this verse, Yatesu Jata Charanam Gurunam Staneshu Pita Senai Tadi Mahi Karkaseshu. Tenatavim Vyatatamati Nakim Swit Kupari Di Brahmadi Baba Ayusamnaha. Here in this verse, it's expressing, oh Krishna, we have come to this forest in the dead of night only for your pleasure. We desired so much to give service to your desire. But now we feel, seeing that you have hidden yourself in the deep forest, where there are many sharp stones, rocks, thorns, that the very heart that we wanted to place your lotus feet on, which are so soft and tender, that heart itself has become harder than those stones and thorns and so forth. So in Ujjalinamani, this is called Kinata Api Sukya Atra Sankaya. It means a sense of feeling the lover is in distress even though they are completely in happiness. So there's so much love and affection for the beloved that one starts to doubt whether their love and affection is making the lover happy. You understand? So gopis express this mood in this verse. You understand? So this is the emblem of what is pure love. This high degree of so much selfless love. And in the material world, people often quickly throw out words like unconditional love. But in the material world, there's not even real love. What to speak of unconditional love? Because real love is unconditional. And here's the expression of it. Right? So the gopis, by expressing this verse, they show what is the nature of our aspired goal. And in that aspired goal, there is no space for salvationism. Even there's one verse, right, that any of the four types of mukti, Sarupya, Salokya, Sarsti, Samipya, Diyamanam Nagra Nanti, Vinamat Sevanajana. Even if I was to be offered liberation, freedom from suffering, a place in Vaikuntha, in one of the four types of liberation, Vinamat Sevanajana. If there's no ability to lovingly serve Bhagavan, I don't want them. Understand? So this mentality is the aspirational desire for those who are practicing bhakti in this line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That there should be no self-interest whatsoever. So of course this doesn't happen overnight, and also there's no fault, especially in the introductory process to bhakti, to really make someone aware of their material condition and why it's not optimal, and why coming to the path of bhakti, akama savakama va moksha kama udaradihi tivena bhakti yogena yajekta purusham param. That no matter what your status is, you have all kinds of desires, you have no desires, you want liberation, whatever your status is, still you should come to worship Shri Krishna, right? So in the beginning, no harm to make that, sort of comparison between material life and its suffering and its fact that you'll never find true happiness, and where you can find freedom from suffering and true happiness. No harm to make that comparison. But in the course of our growth, we will have to come to a point where we're not practicing under that ideal, but we're practicing under the ideal, I want to be a lover of God. And then we will beg, plead, everything else in order to obtain that pure love for Krishna, according to that definition of Sri Rupa Goswami Pad. And only when the jiva comes to that mindset does the Bhakti Devi, Bhakti Shakti, find resonance and a place to come and reside, because Bhakti Devi is a prakash of Srimati Radharani. And Srimati Radharani is, of course, the pinnacle of the ideal I described in that verse. Yate sujata charanam burunam staneshu. You understand? She's the pinnacle persona of that selfless, unconditional love for Sri Krishna. And therefore, there's no facility for her prakash, her manifestation, her shakti of bhakti to serve Krishna coming in the heart that still has contamination of self-interest. So it's imperative that in the course of our practice, we develop that mental shift towards complete, selfless, unconditional, unmotivated, right? Ahoitaki apritiyata, love towards Sri Krishna, right? And the way that that's done is that we have to take shelter of that kind of love personified. Therefore, the ultimate goal of this pure line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is called Radha Dasyam, because Srimati Radhika is the very embodiment of that kind of love. Radhini Sara Prem, Prem Sara Bhav, Bhav Paramakostanam Mahabhav, Mahabhav Swarupini Shri Radha Thakurani. So Srimati Radhika is the very embodiment of that kind of love. We want to take shelter under Srimati Radhika, and in order to do that, then you'll have to get the mercy of her own maidservants, who are called Palyadasis or Manjaris, and they come into this world in the form of our Guru Vargas. If you look at the internal identity of our Guru Vargas, they are all Manjaris. So please do not confuse this to think that there is no other availability of Braja Rasa in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because that's not true. Right? Certainly there are those who also have Sakya Rasa, or Vatsalya Rasa. It may be there. Understand? Just that Madhurya Rasa, and especially Manjari Bhava Radhadasyam, is prominent in the line. So, and of course, in the unfoldment of bhakti, that will not become a major consideration until some maturation starts. So when we take Diksha, Shri Guru will give, by indication, I've quoted the verse many times, Divya Gyanam Yarta Shrimati Mantre, Bhagavat Sarup Gyanam Tena, Bhagavat Sambandha Visesh Gyanam Stra. At the time of taking Diksha, Gurudev will give, in the form of the mantra, indication of your sambandha with a particular form of Krishna. Right? So at that time, you can begin to practice with what's called Sambandha Gyan, and this will lead to a maturation of your mood. Right? Gradually, gradually. In the very beginning, we're still trying to break the material abhiman, means your material self-conception. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm black, I'm white, I'm from this culture, I'm from that culture, I'm rich, I'm poor, right? I'm a Hare Krishna, right? So all the various designations or upadis that we've associated with ourselves, those are first broken. And by the influence of Swarup Shakti in the bhakti practice, bhajana kriya, then automatically those material abhimans will gradually begin to be removed along with the nartas. And then one can begin to have some maturation in nishta when there's not so much material influence. And then, of course, ruchi and bhajan will take place. And when ruchi and bhajan takes place, the efficacy of the bhajan practice itself will become more expansive, more predominant, more permeating of your chitta, your consciousness. And at that time, maturation will more clearly unfold in regards to a particular spiritual identity. And then, of course, in the stage of Asakti, that becomes very clear as the Abbas of any eternal associate appears on the Chitta, giving rise to a fixed mood. I want to serve Krishna like this. And then at that stage, it is only a matter of waiting the mercy of the descent of the substance of Swarup Shakti to completely crystallize and make substantively that realization in your Chitta. You understand? Or in your consciousness. So, the point here was to discuss this ideal of Salvationist approach versus lover of Krishna approach. And obviously and hopefully, it's clear that at some point the nature of self-interest can actually become an obstacle. And I'm talking about even after 40 or 50 years of practice, where we start to see Krishna consciousness as a tool of creating a better material life. Right now that I've understood Krishna's God and I'm Krishna's servant, I got that out the way. So therefore now my material life can be facilitated without any doubt about what the truth is. Right? Because there's a whole sense of self-satisfaction that evolves from that idea, a kind of self-righteousness. And you see it in other faiths also, right? Like people will say, have you been saved? Right? So if you have not been saved, then you're in turmoil or you're in some bad situation, and I've been saved. Right? So there's a sense of self-righteousness, a sense of I'm in a good position, I'm good to go. Right? So that can happen within the context of bhakti as well. Oh, now we know what is the absolute truth, and I'm a servant of Krishna, and Krishna is God, and he's personally God, and I know that. And so a sense of self-satisfaction rests in, and then we start to utilize that ideal. As long as I keep the faith, practice, follow for regular principles, chant 16 rounds, I'm kind of good to go. Everything else is gravy. And when I die, automatically I'm going to go back to Godhead, because like Jesus Christ, my Gurudev is ultimately so merciful, I'm going to go back to Godhead. Right? So that can start to become the mindset. And therefore the idea of what is love becomes less of an important pursuit. Right? Therefore the nuances of the knowledge of how to love God becomes less important. And it can even be dismissed. I've heard devotees speak that, yeah, I'm not so interested in Gyan. Right? So then if you ask, well, define what is Gyan. I defined earlier what is Gyan in relation to bhakti, which one is favorable, which is not favorable. But if you don't have this particular understanding of Gyan, and you give an outright idea that anybody who can quote 10 verses is a Gyani, and, I just want the real bhakti, and, right? It could also, by closer examination, be laziness, or it could be a sense of self-satisfaction and a lack of desire to go any further, because I've already achieved the self-satisfaction I wanted from this process, and therefore I don't need to keep examining, because by continual probing, I might end up having a deeper sense of responsibility or obligation involved, which is what should naturally happen. The more we advance in bhakti, the deeper the nature of the obligation arises in the heart, and therefore adjustments continually need to be made in terms of genuine detachment and in terms of genuine practice and so forth. And so sometimes, there is a kind of idea, I don't necessarily want to become more obligated. This is sufficient, right? I know Krishna is God, I'm the servant of God, and I'm practicing all the basic elements, and we're good to go. So don't ask me to start pursuing any deeper connections, deeper conceptions, so forth. And therefore, I can distinctly remember a whole period arising in the overall Vaishnava Mandal, well, not overall Vaishnava, I can't say that, in the institution, our ISKCON institution, of a triggering by even ideals like Bhav, Gopi, Rag, Ras, right? Any Raganuga, anything that had to do with anything which indicated a deeper sense of understanding for one, hence a deeper sense of true Gyan related to bhakti, and a deeper sense of obligation based on now understanding that, was kind of being pushed away. Listen, just practice, just be simple. And also there was a kind of homogeneous perspective that everybody is just at a certain level and everybody needs to just practice at that level. Don't try to exceed the ceiling mentality, so to speak. And in part that might have been due to the lack of clear understanding and realization on behalf of those who were in leadership to be able to express those concepts and those ideals and have realization of them, and a lack of desire to have the association of those who did understand become part of the, the sort of shepherding of Srila Prabhupada's movement, right? So the two things combined help to create the dynamic of Salvationist mentality when it comes to Bhakti. And other expressions of the Salvationist mentality become Krishna consciousness becoming the backdrop. And I've spoken on this, so I'm not going to elaborate on it. I'm actually going to get ready to wind up here. But the idea of taking various modalities within the mode of goodness and having Krishna consciousness as the backdrop to it, right? So that has also come out of the model of Salvationist ideals, right? That we're trying to fix us, right? We're trying to work on us, right? I am trying to get myself together, right? But actually, by surrender, the process of Saranagati, there's automatically built-in correction of anything that you consider to be wrong with you. There's no better self-correction program than Bhakti itself. And Bhakti is Swata Siddha. It means it is self-perfected. So it does not require the aid or assistance of other modalities to make its efficacy fully manifest. Right? So that's why Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and all of our acharyas have stressed Saranagati. Simply, Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Vivarjanam, right? Rakshishiti Guptave Varanam Tata Atmanikshepa Karpanya Saranga Saranagati. Simply follow those 6 principles of rejecting things unfavorable, accepting those things which are favorable, seeing Krishna is my protector and maintainer. In other words, the idea that Krishna is my only shelter. There is nothing else for me but Bhakti. So everything that I see, I have to see it in relation to Krishna. I spoke the other day from Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, Ahameva Shamevagri Nanyat Sarasat Paramam Pascharaham Yalisascha Yogashisheta Shashmiyaham. And then Arte Ritayatam Yakvareta Na Prayita Chatmani Tadvyat Atmanumayam. Krishna first of all says there's nothing but God. Before, during, and after the creation, there is nothing really but God. And anything that you see as separate from that, or having any kind of sense of existence or value outside of that, is Tadvyo Atmanamaya. It's Maya. It's a kind of not this. This is literally the meaning of Maya, not this. It's not. It's not real. Right? Either energies may genuinely be real, but the conception of the relationship between yourself and those energies is not real if you don't see it in relation to Krishna. Therefore, yesterday on the facilitation of our Sunday Zoom class, we spoke about that. And we spoke about the fact that there's nothing in your entire existence that's not related to Krishna. Your family, your job, your children, all of that is related to Bhagavan. If you don't have that perspective on those things, then somehow or another Maya has crept into your circle. So all has to be seen in relationship to Krishna, genuinely, not by a rope. A rope means, like a rope siddha bhakti, means to assign something to Bhakti. It's basically for my own self-interest, but I'm going to assign it to Bhakti so that it has the connection. No, we genuinely have to see, under a genuine consideration of seva, how all these things are connected. If you're working a job, you need to maintain yourself to serve Hari, Guru, and Vaishnava. If you're raising children, you're raising children with the aspiration that this soul who came into your situation, your arrangement, is now being raised to serve Krishna. Right? What may happen in the future is their own individual reality, but that's your responsibility when you're raising the children. Right? So like this, everything should be seen like that. There is nothing separate from Bhagavan, and I should have no self-interest. Because if you see a self-interest, it means you're seeing yourself through the lens of ahamkara. This is literally the meaning of the word ahamkara. I am the cause and the doer of all the activities in relation to me, and everything should be seen in relation to me. And God can be there as a backdrop. I don't mind. So obviously that can't happen. So the reality is that if you look at all the scriptures, you will never see the word aham used in relation to the jiva, except in the context of Brahmavad, like aham brahmasmi, right? And of course, the true meaning of aham brahmasmi means simply that I am Satchidanand. I am not earth, water, fire, ether, etc., etc. This is the meaning. It does not mean I am Parabrahman. You understand? So actually, the term used for the jiva, I explained this yesterday as well, is Dashoshmi. Right? In Jiva Goswami's Paramatma Sandarbha, he describes 21 qualities of the Jivatma, and he describes Paramatma Kaseshitva Swabhav. That the Jivas are the Paramatma Sage. Sage literally means remainder, but here in this context, or this application, it means a part, a special part of the Paramatma called Vibhinangsa, Visheshvinangsa, right? A specialized part meant for a particular purpose in relation to the whole. Just like the hand is a part of the body meant for particular functions in relation to the whole body. So the function of the Jivatma is love and service to Bhagavan. That's its sort of purpose for which it is designed. Now, if it acts outside that purpose, it creates something that's not, obviously not real. Just like if you close your eyes and try to walk down the block by using your hand to see, that would be ridiculous. So in the same way, the Jivatma trying to do anything else but be the servant of Bhagavan is ridiculous. Right? It's mentioned also in Upanishad, Dasabuti Hari Eva, Nanyasha Eva Kadachana. Because the Jiva at no time can be something else. Dasabuti Hari Eva. Dasosmi is our actual identity. So living in that identity and seeing everything in relation to Krishna with the ideal of developing pure love for Krishna is the very nature of the practice of bhakti. So we want to try to make that differentiation and not be trapped in any of the nuances or various categories of salvationist mindset in regard to bhakti. Jai my Dandavat Pranam devotees. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhavevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So I also have been mentioning, I am still working out maybe last details of the first travel for the summer. And then of course there'll be a second travel hopefully in the latter part of the summer. I have to get back to one devotee. I have to work out if and how it's possible to get back to Seattle. I know very sweet devotees there have requested to come back to Seattle. I'm not mentioning names because I never do that on these sessions. But I will try. I'll try to work some way. Of course, I've driven there the last time that I went. And I like that because it gives me the ability to obviously do other Harikatha service while I'm traveling. But it may not be possible here just because of the distance, so forth. So it may end up being that I will fly and then maybe perhaps try to do other Harikatha Seva on the West Coast and then fly back. Anyways, I'll try to get that worked out, but that, I can discuss. I just didn't want... I was thinking about it and meditating how to do it, which is why I have not replied directly to Didi and Prabhu's inquiries about that. In fact, I think today I'll go ahead, since I have thought about it more, and reply to them directly and see how I can facilitate that. There's such kind devotees and such encouraging devotees also for me. So I do want to be able to try to make that happen. But I do know the East Coast and not mid, I don't know what you call it, the Ohio area and all that, that'll happen in the first travel. And then in the second travel, obviously, Texas and other places will happen. So then we'll get everything else worked out. All right, my Dandavat Pranam devotees, Jai Radhe Radhe.